Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. Before we start, I would like to tell you that today is a very important day. 20th of May is very interesting and important day because today is the last day when Zelensky is the president of Ukraine. Starting off tomorrow, he is no longer the president of Ukraine. Of course, he will, let's say, extend his own present terms by different laws and by different manipulations, probably mainly for the local people, for Ukrainians themselves and for probably Western countries, but most likely when talking about Russia and enemies of Ukraine, they will not, let's say, agree on that, and they will not recognize Zelensky as the president anymore. Furthermore, we got a lot of updates that the Russian sources, to different people from Russia start, let's say, posting reports and updates that that on the 20th, on the night from the 20th to 21st of May, the Russians will launch massive missile strike all over the entire territory of Ukraine, and that the Russians are going to attack even the targets that they haven't attacked before. The Ukrainian sources confirmed that on the airfield Alenia, the Russians concentrated significant number of, let's say, rocket launchers, significant number, and most likely the next night is going to be the worst night ever for Ukraine. So we'll see, of course, what is going to be next, but once again, this is going to be the most important and interesting days ever. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. We have additional updates. The deep state maps confirms the Russian progress along the border, and that the Russians launched a small offensive operation on the line between Sireda, the village by the name of Sireda on the territory of Russian Federation, towards the village by the name of Zelena. So the Russians established small control for now without entering Zelena itself. Now let's move to Vovchansk. We have very interesting details from this territory as well. Deep State confirms that the Russians managed to establish complete control over the forest and along the Seversky Donetsk river bank of the river, and that now the Russians have no problems to cross the river and to enter Vovchansk from the west. The different mappers confirms the Russian complete control over the northern part. So from now on, some mappers, reliable mappers, consider this territory as a complete territory under Russian control, including this industrial zone. Furthermore, lots of mappers confirmed that the Russians managed to cross Vovchansk river and that there are currently very heavy clashes already in the southern part. The Ukrainians shown us just one video of FPV drone strikes on Russian soldiers who were moving from one building to another on the northern part of Vovchansk. So anyway, most likely the north of Vovchansk has fallen. Now let's move further to the south. We have additional updates, and we see a very heavy we see intensifying of actions on the line Kislovka, Kotlerovka, Skol River. During the previous night, the Russians published significant number of videos of how they destroyed Ukraine armored vehicles, artillery systems, many other different types of weapon and equipment that Ukrainians were using on this direction. So most likely the Russians are clearing the territory before further offensive operations to the west. Because if you remember, during the previous days we talked a lot about the village by the name of Berestova and Mesazharovka, where the Russians continue offensive. We have additional updates from different mappers like Deep State confirming that the Russians did manage to improve their positions in the vicinity of Berestova, and that it's like about 2-3 days and the Russians will capture entire territory. Now we're moving further to Chasiv Yar, to Klishchiivka, where the Russians yesterday launched an offensive operation. Was very powerful attack from the Russian side, and it's still covered with the fog of war. The entire territory covered with the fog of war. We have additional video of Russian personnel carrier inside of Chasiv Yar itself. The first one, a Russian vehicle, was destroyed and abandoned a few days ago when the Russian attack. This is the next, let's say, vehicle arrived in the area, probably for rotation or evacuation, or the Russians brought additional forces in this area. So anyway, the only thing we can know for sure that there are still very heavy clashes, and we can't confirm that the Russians established complete control over the eastern part of Chasiv Yar. Furthermore, telling the truth, there are a lot of pro-Russian sources, very pro-Russian and very reliable sources, who stated that the storm of the eastern Chasiv Yar failed and that the Russians were defeated and had significant losses. For now, we can't confirm this information or do anything else, but anyway, we still will keep this area as a gray zone because we need more updates and additional details about the situation. The Russians continue offensive operation in Klishchiivka, and we have additional updates that the Russians captured, let's say, most of Klishchiivka, at least the part of Klishchiivka that located in the lowland. But some mappers are saying that the Russians also managed to improve their positions and to capture this part of Klishchiivka in the vicinity of the Pounds. So let's wait. Anyway, it's despite where exactly the Russians to move, anyway we see that most of Klishchiivka is already under Russian control. We see some activization of clashes, let's say, along Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal in the southern part. The Russians during the previous night published significant number of videos of how they were hunting the Ukrainian forces in the area, attacking them with FPV drones, trying to destroy the Ukrainian trenches and the fortifications. We have artillery strikes, we have a lot of things, and so let's wait. Maybe, and this is not like the first time. We received significant number of videos during the previous days as well. So maybe the Russians do have some plans to cross the canal, this area, and to start offensive towards the village by the name of Avdiivka. Now let's move to Avdiivka area, where we got some surprised updates. For example, this one, we have two mappers confirmed very interesting progress of the armed force of Russian Federation towards Alexandropol. For example, deep state mappers and, for example, Syriac mappers confirmed that the Russians managed to improve their positions in this area and to capture additional tree lines in the fields along between N20 road and between Keramic and Nova Kalinova village itself. So this is obviously significant progress. We see that the Russians are getting closer and closer to Alexandropol and to this stronghold. And well, the thing is, if we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of May, we're gonna see that the Russians were pretty focused during the previous days on this direction. The Russians were bombing this territory of 4 strongholds. This is the first one, the second, third, and fourth. 4 strongholds of armed forces of Ukraine were under very heavy fire during the previous months during May. So the Russians most likely are going to start offensive on this direction as well. And most likely the battle for New York, Donetsk, also is going to be a part of the battle for Chasiv Yar, because this is like a key region, let's say, in the global battle for Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Without this, let's say, towns, the Russians will not be able to move further to the west in direction of Konstantinovka. So once again, as you can see, very heavy Russian focus since the beginning of months. Now let's move further to the west towards Berdichi. We have additional progress of the Russian forces in the fields, closer and closer to Novopokrovskaya. The Russians are moving very slow, but they are moving further to the west. We have additional update confirming the Russian complete control over the road between Nitailova, Yasnobrodovka, and Umanska. So the Russians, let's say, captured the territory, significant say squares, and now the Russians are able to start clashes in the final battle for Yasnobrodovka. Krasnohorivka, no update. We have additional update from Georgiivka. If you remember, a few days ago we got report that the Russians captured almost entire Georgiivka and the fields, strongholds to the south. There we got just geolocation of how Ukrainians were destroying the abandoned Russian armored vehicles and personnel carriers, which confirms most likely that the Russians did capture the, let's say, fields and the stronghold between them. At least we see the tank with demining equipment that was damaged and destroyed somewhere in the vicinity of the stronghold. For now, we can't tell for sure whether the stronghold was captured, but most likely the stronghold was captured. Paraskovievka, today we got the final confirmation that the Russians entered the village and managed to dig in deeper. We have different mappers update, including Deep State, and we have one video that was published by the Ukrainians, more precisely by the 79th Air Mobile Brigade. They're showing us that the Russians managed to capture this building and the Ukrainians were bombing this territory with artillery and aviation bomb. As a result of those strikes, we see the Ukrainians dealt the Russians some damage and we can't know for sure what exactly the Ukrainians managed to do, but anyway, we see that this video confirms the Russian presence and that the Russians are there. So we have adjusted the map, as you can see, and it's not, as I understand, during the next few days, the Russians will capture entire Paraskovievka. Also, we have additional updates along between Novomikhailivka, Konstantinovka, Vadyan, and Sokol. The Russians captured additional 3 lines towards the main supply road 0524, and if we summarize everything we received achieved during the previous days. This is approximately the territory that is already under Russian control. As you can see, the Russians are moving slowly, step by step, but using broad frontline attack, and they're trying to get as close as possible to 0524 road and to establish fire and then physical control over the main supply road between the strongholds on this direction. So the situation is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians in this area as well. So this is the current situation, very difficult, as we can see, for the Ukrainians. So we see Zelensky the last day, we see the situation in Russia with the preparation to the massive missile strike, and of course the most important updates from Iran. We have report that the helicopter crashed in the northern part of Iran, and as a result of that, let's say, crash, the president of Iran, let's say, lost his life, and now Raisi. So that's why we will keep him at this on the map until the Iran will, let's say, elect another president, and after that we will change the icon on map. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.